I'm going to try to get all of chapter 60A on one recording. We'll see if we can do it or not. Thank goodness Caesar is as clear and unornamented as you can possibly be. So here we go. On the 7th day of the siege, a very great wind having arisen, they began to throw or toss burning acorns from soft molded clay and javelins on fire or fiery darts against the houses of the camp, which in Gallic custom were covered or had been covered in straw. These quickly caught fire and spread into all directions or in every place of the camp from the size of the wind. The enemy, with a great shout, just as if the victory had already been achieved and confirmed, began to move up their towers and their shells and to ascend the wall of the camp with ladders. But such a great courage of the soldiers and such presence of mind was there that although they were being scorched from all sides and they were being pressed by a great multitude of weapons, and they understood that all their baggage and fortunes were burning, not only did nobody go back from the wall or climb around from the wall for the sake of running away, but hardly anybody even looked back. And then all fought very fiercely and bravely. This day was by far very serious for our men, but nevertheless it had this outcome that on that day a very large number of enemies was wounded and killed. The flame, having been cooled down for a little bit or interrupted for a little bit, and the tower having been brought up into a certain place and touching the wall, the centurions of the third cohort withdrew from the place where they were standing and called back all their men, and with nods and voices they began to call to the enemies if they wished to come in, of whom nobody dared to come forward. Then, stones having been thrown from every direction, they were put to flight and the tower was burned. Notice again, when you go through this, how the main verb is at the end of the sentence. They began to throw. This tells when. This tells under what circumstances. This tells what they actually were throwing against the houses and why the houses caught fire, the little huts caught fire. This part tells the result of throwing of the hot bullets, that it caught fire, and why it spread so quickly. The wind was great. What the enemies did with a loud shout, they began to rush in as if everything were already finished up. Here we're coming to a result clause set off by our tanta, but so great was the courage and their presence of mind that And before we get to the result in the ut clause, we have the great long although clause covered quite thoroughly in the note. Although with torrerentur, with premerentur, with intelligurent, the piece of indirect statement they understood that their baggage and fortunes were burning. Here we have the negator that says, hey, look, I'm a result clause. Not only did nobody go back, but also hardly anybody even looked back. And finally, the verb that says, everybody fought fiercely and bravely. Sum up of the day, it was not good at all for our guys, but it had not too bad of an outcome. At least we killed and wounded and killed a bunch of the enemies. In the next one, we have our ablative absolute telling what's going on and what's going on. And then finally we get to the verb of it. Nobody dared to come. They began to taunt them and say, come on in, guys. Come have supper with us. But of those guys, nobody dared to come forward. And then again, still more stones throwing from our side and put the guys to flight, and even their tower got put on fire.